Hey everyone, so today I'm going to talk about Nintex Workflow Cloud and cleaning up the default storage. So this is the Nintex Workflow Cloud environment, and when you go up here to settings, you'll see there's a section here called default file storage. Now what that means is when we're dealing with things like a form that starts a workflow and there's attachments, things of that nature, it needs a location where it's going to temporarily store some data. We're going to store those attachments so that the workflow can do something with them. Now, what you probably want to do at the end of your workflow is actually clean up that data. Now, when you go into default storage or default file storage, there's only one that's going to be that's the default one that Nintex Workflow Cloud is going to use. You'll see here I'm using a box environment, and in the box environment I have a folder called attachments. So that's where all my files are going to go. And here's my box environment, so everything will go into here. Now, over time, they can grow. You have a bunch of folders, you have a bunch of file attachments, things like that. So this is all being stored in your box environment, not Nintex's. So how would you go about building out something that will clean that up? So firstly, once you create this default file storage, you go over here and you say, I want to build a particular type of workflow. Now, remember, you're probably going to be having multiple workflows that have file attachments as in the startup forms. So you might want to build this out in such a way that it's reusable in other workflows. So in this case, we're going to just zoom in a little bit. And for the start event, we'll select Nintex. And then for the event, we'll select component workflow. And for those who don't know what a component workflow is, it's basically a reusable workflow where you have input and output parameters. And you can see here you can create your start event variables. Now, what I would recommend is you would create two things in here. One would be the parent workflow instance ID, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And the other one might be folder name. That way you can build a workflow that will actually go through and clean up the right files in your default file storage. So let's have a look at how I built this out because I've already done this. Let's go over here. So here's my start event, my component workflow. Now I only have one parameter in there, which is the parent workflow instance ID. Like I said, it's probably a good idea to have a folder in there, folder name as well, because with different workflows, you'll probably have different locations in your EFSS, your box, your OneDrive, whatever it is, to store your attachments and store your files. So I would definitely recommend, let's actually create this. We'll just call it folder name and close. Now, what this is doing, now this is specific to Box. You can do exactly the same thing with OneDrive, with Dropbox, whatever you need. So the first thing I'm doing is saying, get me the folder contents of, and let's actually do this. Let's get rid of attachments and let's insert my folder name. So now I've got slash folder name, so it's dynamic, and slash the workflow instance ID. Now the reason being is when files are attached to a form and the workflow starts, over here in Box or in OneDrive, it will create a folder with the workflow instance ID, which is a GUID. That'll be the folder where those files are kept, and then inside that folder will be all your attachments. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's go back to the workflow. So this is going to go and find me all the files that are in that specific folder, right? And I have a collection variable called collection files delete. Now I'm going through and doing a loop for each. So I'm iterating through each of those files to delete. You can actually see right here. Go through the collection of files delete, store each one in something called a text file path variable, and then I'm going to use delete file to delete that file. I'm also going to go up here and I'm going to update attachments and insert that folder name. All right, so now it's going to delete the folder as well. So that just completely cleans up this attachments folder. But what it does is it only cleans up the data for that specific parent workflow instance. Right, so you don't want to go through and delete all the files, all the folders. You just want to delete the ones that are specific to that parent workflow that's calling this component workflow. All right, so we publish this. I've called this box cleanup attachments workflow. I probably should have called it component workflow or something like that. Okay, so now that you've done this, how do you reuse this? With this URL, go over here and click on copy. Right, and you can see here it actually says open API specification. So you've made a copy of this URL. Then what you do is you go back to the front page of Nintex Workflow Cloud and click on extensions. And in here, it's going to be really easy. You click on the little orange plus here. In the Open API specification URL, you paste the URL, click on next, etc. Add an icon, and it will create a new extension for you, right? Basically create a new action. So I'm actually going to go over here and I'm going to edit mine because I created a new parameter. All right. Now what this means is when you go to building a workflow, so let's refresh this, you'll now find that there is a category down the bottom left that has a name of your workflow, your component workflow that you just built. Let's give that a second to load up. And what that means is you can now drag and drop that action onto the workflow or onto any workflow and reuse it. So let's go down here. There's my box cleanup attachments workflow. I can drag and drop that onto here, click on it, and you can see there's my folder name. So I can do attachments for my text parent workflow instance ID. I can scroll down here and go, there's my workflow instance ID. That's it. I can pretty much ignore that. I leave the rest. I don't need any of that sort of stuff. But that means that this workflow can do all the work and at the end run this action. And I'll give you a really good example. Right over here, we have a start form. This start form is very simple. It just has an attachment control or a file upload control, which means that somebody, when they're filling in the form, can go and attach whatever documents that they want. Right, so it's a pretty straightforward one, just a file upload. And let's go back to the workflow design. Then we have things like express approvals, if it's rejected, if it's approved, do some calculations, etc. At the very end, we have this box cleanup. Right, now you can see here, there's no folder because I need to refresh this. I will lose all this information, but that's okay. Let's reload it. But you can see now I can drag and drop this action quite easily onto my design canvas, onto whatever workflow design I'm building, and I'll be able to have the last step in my workflow clean up my my box environment or my OneDrive environment, etc. All right, let's see. Oh, I'll probably have to delete that and actually add a new one because it got updated, it kept an old copy. So I can do that. Yeah, there we go. I can do attachments and then insert the workflow instance ID right there. And then of course I'll have the rest of my workflow built out. So hopefully this makes a little bit of sense to you guys. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to have this on YouTube. I'm also going to have this on vadimtabachman.com. Like I said, if you have any comments, questions, feel free to add them to the YouTube video or to the blog post on vadimtabachman.com. I'll also have this workflow here. Oops, where are we? This workflow here. I'll actually export this and share the workflow instance ID. You will need to make some modifications because when you go to these box actions, there'll be this connection option. Of course, you probably won't have something called box Nintex, so you'll need to modify that a little bit. That one, the delete a file and delete a folder. So make sure you just update those to suit your environment. All right. Thanks for your time, guys. And like I said, if you have any comments or questions, please add them to the bottom of the video or the blog post. Thanks, guys.